birds, people, and the dogs that bring them together. This is episode number 32. My name is Bill, and you're tied to the Wopost. In this episode, I'm talking to the original Bird Dog Podcast host, Ron Boehme, of the Hunting Dog Podcast. You're probably already familiar with this show, but if not, Ron hosts a weekly show focused on informative entertainment, and he hosts everyone from professional trainers and breeders right down to everyday hunters and handlers, just like you and me. Ron and I are talking about this week's breed, the Bracco Italiano, but we also spend a good amount of time talking about everything from breeder selection, puppy training, hunt tests, and why trimming my beard for a job interview was a bad idea. Before we start, I want to take a minute to talk about friend of the podcast, Jacob Perry, and the premier grouse and woodcock hunting experience of the Upper Peninsula that he provides. Superior Upland is a full-spectrum upland hunting experience. From a simple day hunting planted birds in the preserve to fully guided hunts in the deepest, darkest covers in the Upper Peninsula. Whether it's your first hunt and you're testing the waters, you're mobility impaired and are looking for a simpler, safer opportunity, or you're looking for the grouse hunting experience of a lifetime, Superior Upland's got you covered. Hunt over your own dogs or follow Jake's prime-time string of Gordon setters into the aspens and berries. Check him out at superiorupland.com. And don't forget to ask about booking for a full-service hunt, including lodging and meals, for the 2025 season. I'd also like to thank my Patreon patrons who voluntarily support the podcast by donating $3 per month. Remember, the Wopost patrons are who keep me going. They're part of a growing community that gets exclusive blog content and more to come. To become a patron, head over to patreon.com/thewopost. The Bracco Italiano is one of the oldest pointing breeds. Tough and adapted to all types of hunting, the Bracco Italiano is reliable, intelligent, docile, and easy to train. He has a powerful hound-like appearance with lean limbs, well-developed muscles, and a sculpted head. Their history reaches back to the 4th or 5th century BC. It's generally accepted that the Bracco was a first cross between the Segugio Italiano and the Asiatic Mastiff, which has since become extinct. The breed was developed in northern Italy with two distinct varieties, the white and orange colored variety known to be from the Piedmont region, and the roan and brown from Lombardy. The Piedmontese pointer was used for work in the mountains, which its conformation and temperament reflected. It was smaller than its counterpart in Lombardy, and it was primarily white, with or without orange markings. The Lombard pointer was a rich brown roan and had a heavier body type. This dog was used for hunting in the marshy lowlands and was a trotting breed. These big dogs were bred both for their eye appeal and natural hunting ability. Over the centuries, crossing with hounds and poor breeding resulted in dogs that were too heavily built to perform their work, and the breed suffered from various health problems. By the 1800s, the breed was nearly extinct. Diligent breeding selection and care aided in rebuilding the breed. In the 1920s, it was decided to unify the two variations of the breed in order to preserve genetic diversity. Shortly after the breed was officially unified, the working standard was written and released, and in 1949, the Italian conformation standard was published, incorporating aspects of both breed types. Braccos have a huge acceptable height range from 21 to 27 inches, and for reference, 21 inches is smaller than a lot of small Munsterlander males. Braccos weigh generally between 55 and 90 pounds. They have a short, smooth coat that can be white, white and orange, or white and chestnut. They're generally big, affectionate, cooperative dogs that are eager to please, quick learners, and while they still generally need a job, they're also happy to sit with you on the porch and watch you sip on your favorite beverage. Ron, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, you're welcome. Bill, I did not know of you because I have not spent time behind the wheel like I used to. And I used to know every podcast that came out if it had anything to do with dogs. And you reached out to me, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It looks like you've been doing this for, I guess, just 2024, right? You just started.
Yeah, I'm just over 6 months into it right now.
Yeah, and your question was, you were looking for someone who knew about the Bracco breed, which I was, I don't want to say I was honored. I was like, well, I'm glad he picked me, but. in my podcasting history, I had always thought about going down the lines of all the different breeds. And when I saw that's what you were doing, I thought that's a great idea. Yeah, because I've actually a lot of new podcasters will call me up and say, or write me and say, Ron, I've been listening to your show for years. I'm starting a podcast. I'm like, okay. And I always tell them, why don't you get like a year under your belt or a half year? Because some of them want me on the first episode. I'm like, nah, get your wings a little bit first. And so, but your subject matter of what you're covering sounded interesting, and I love talking people out of Bracco Italianos. So you know,
And that's a really good perspective to put on it, though, because there are a lot of us look at our breeds as our favorite team, right? So I'm going to tell you why everybody should be a Cincinnati Reds fan, because I'm a Cincinnati Reds fan. I will admit it too, which is not easy to do, but that's not how dog breeds work. And what people are really asking is, what do I need to know about this breed in order to make a decision? So coming across from that perspective of this is why maybe you wouldn't want a Bracco is probably better information for most people. Before we go too far, though, so first of all, obviously, thanks for being on the show. And also thanks so you are the first hunting dog podcast. Well, you're the only hunting dog podcast because that's the name of your podcast.
Right. Yeah.
But you are the absolute first, and you're the one who's kind of paved the way for the rest of us that are out here, trying to build community, right?
Yeah.
So, I appreciate you doing that and maybe making my life a little bit easier.
Well, I didn't do it with the intent of ever turn it into a career or starting a trend, but I'm glad the path went both ways. It kind of turned into a career, and it turned into there's a lot of good content out there. And I don't keep track of it, but there's probably at least a dozen currently, and there's been more. And I didn't know it was going to turn into that, but I'm glad it did. And if it probably did give a few people that, well, hell, if that idiot could do it, I could do it. Because when I started out, I had my Zoom recorder, like the one up here on my desk, one of my travel Zooms, and I would literally tilt it down to my cell phone on speaker.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I was figuring, well, that's the only engineering I could figure out, and it was fun. It was fun growing. It was been fun watching people get their show developed and becoming not anything more than just another one of us, that we love it so much we got to talk about it. That's basically what I do.
Yeah, there are a lot worse ways to spend the day than sitting down talking about bird dogs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Could be talking about work. Yeah, real work.
Oh gosh, yeah. So can you go ahead and, beyond your podcast, can you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, all right. My name is Ron Boehme. I'm an old timer. I've been at this. I got my first hunting license in 1972, so that kind of can figure out my age. And grew up in Illinois. I actually grew up in the city limits of Chicago, and I will tell everybody who goes, "Ooh, I love that city." It was the best place for me to grow up. And when people talk about public lands, I had the whole city. Like me and my friends, you could jump on a bus, jump on a train, hitchhike. I mean, it was like our public lands. And for me and my friends growing up, there was a couple of big cemeteries adjacent to our neighborhood. So we were always out, catching frogs and jumping in ponds and getting in trouble with we called them the cemetery police. They were actually the guys who mowed the lawn, but we called them cemetery police. But yeah, my start came back in 72. I got my first small game license, and growing up in Chicago, it was really obviously a minority, in our neighborhood. But we had one friend's dad who was a real good shooter. He was a member of a trap shooting club, and another friend's dad who hunted occasionally and used to hunt a lot. So we had that little smidgen of, if it wasn't for those two friends, David and Joe, I don't know. I might have just been in the Millwrights Union and stayed in Chicago. I don't know. But it got me and my friends were kind of the odd ones in high school. We went to some state places. In Illinois, they have a pheasant release program, which, a lot of hunters will poo-poo game farms and pheasant releases. And but it was an opportunity. We had nowhere else to go, but we had a passion to go there. And we would go there as often as we could. We'd go in the will call line the night before. 5 of us would sleep in a car and try to get in line to, swat down in fact, it was so the pictures we have from back then are really you wouldn't put them online now because half the birds we shot were hens.
Right.
They were released the night before off of a pickup truck, but damn, we were proud of them. So as far as I know, me and my group were the only 5 people in a high school of 2,000 people that were pheasant hunters. And that's where it started. And I know one of the questions you mentioned, that you want to ask is, how I got into bird dogs. That was just from going to the state place. We would just walk them up. There'd be 5 of us. Again, these are released birds. I don't know how many they put out, but there's a lot put out, on the weekend mornings.
Right.
And we came back to get lunch at this little state. Oh, it was a Czech station, but they had sloppy joes for lunch all the time. And there was a guy there with a German short hair. I could close my eyes and still see it was a really beautiful liver tick male short hair. And he saw us coming up with our pheasants. You had to get a little tag put on them, and you had to get a transportation tag. So if you were obviously on the way back to Chicago, if you were pulled over, you certainly you have to have something on a hen pheasant that says you didn't shoot a hen pheasant. And the guy said, I noticed you guys are a little light on birds. And we said, yeah, but we did pretty good. It probably had 1 apiece or something. And he says, well, I've got a dog that needs some more work and I already got my birds. Do you want to go out with me after you eat lunch? And we're like, yeah. So even all the little people we'd bump into, and there'd be a lot of people there with dogs, we were never asked by anybody, and we weren't going to say, hey, can we follow you? We're just 16, 17-year-old kids, 18-year-old kids. And when this guy asked us, he took us, basically back down this road, and he just said, let's just watch the dog. And we watched this dog point and retrieve and point, and, we're hitting them and retrieving. And I was just like starstruck. We had a house dog. I had known in the neighborhood had a hunting dog, and I watched this German short hair, and that was the game changer. It was like, I didn't mean I was going to get a German short hair. I said, I'm getting a bird dog someday.
Right.
Now, I had a little decade to go before that happened, but that was where it started, was watching this guy's short hair. And, for a good hunting dog to go to a preserve and put on a show, it's kind of like T-ball, right? We're not talking about a why, but for someone who's new to it and saw that and saw what the dog could add to it, yeah, that stayed in my head for a decade. I said, this has got to happen. This has got to happen. There's got to be a dog. And then the path came from, trying to find one someday, which that's a whole nother podcast, But that's where it started, in the good old city of Chicago on the outskirts of there.
It's funny, you did say that people don't really like the preserves or the put and take bird concept for the states. And I understand from a conservation perspective why that's not the best thing. I understand from a true hunter's perspective why the game preserve, the canned hunt, right, is not their favorite. But I love them. Maybe not for me personally, maybe not for my dogs all the time, but because they're such a great way to introduce somebody to upland hunting. Just like you did, my first upland hunt, if you will, was on a preserve on the eastern shore of Maryland. If there's no other place, it's certainly not in Maryland, where I'm going to go and see 12 birds in one day.
Right. Yeah.
And get a shot on 12 birds, and probably come home with most of those birds. Right. It's just not going to happen with a new hunter.
Right.
So now, if you live in, southwestern North Dakota, maybe your mileage may vary. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for most of us, that's just not the case.
No.
So yeah, I love them. A great way to introduce kids. In a safe environment where they're going to see a lot of game. It's a great way to introduce any new hunter in a safe environment where you can see a lot of game.
I've been a big proponent of it. I even helped a guy here in Michigan who was kind of getting that program restarted. Because I said it's opportunity. It's an opportunity without, in fact, most of those places you could call them up and they'll have somebody that'll guide for you. If you just
Yep.
want to experience, you don't even have to have that first buddy that has the dog, right? You could just go there and be like, let's try this. Yeah, no, it's I have as much fun doing that as I have doing anything.
Sure.
I'm not a purist. I don't have a hit list. I've got friends that have chased every bird in the country in North America. And I'll be like, okay, well, I just don't. If I can't hunt with friends and some dogs that get along, it doesn't matter to me if it's in North Dakota or if it's at the Rooster Ranch in Michigan. We just have fun. Yeah.
Sure. All right. So you started out hunting over a short hair. How did you get to Braccos?
That was a little bit of a journey. So real quick, when we moved to Michigan, which I had always wanted to do because I had an uncle that lived up here and we used to come up here in the summer. I looked in the newspaper. My wife saw a German short hair for $45 in the newspaper. And I'm saying, good enough.
Great dog.
Great dog. It was already housebroke. I just had no idea it liked to run away. Okay. But I tried, I had him for a couple seasons till he ran away for the third time. The Forest Service got him back to me twice.
Wow.
In an emaciated state both
Oh
times.
boy.
He was a runaway dog, but damn it, I had a German short hair. And then I decided I was going to buy one from a breeder. What a great idea, right? I'm going to do a little research. So I was already getting Gun Dog magazine because that's your gateway magazine when you start, at least back in the day. And so I looked at some ad, and there was an ad for a kennel that was a great kennel. And it was over in Rockford, Michigan, Pine Hill Kennel. And I went there and I literally did a side job. I moonlit on my own company. In other words, I went back and tiled the floor for a job I did, and I billed him cash. Otherwise, my wife would have to invoice, and she would know that I was going to get a dog. So she didn't really pay attention to how much. I just told her I was getting another dog. Okay, that one was $45. Certainly,
Right.
he wouldn't. So I moonlighted on my own company, so I could buy a $350 dog,
There
which
you
was
go.
which was the going rate for a good German short hair back in the day.
Okay.
So I got a good German short hair. She was a sweetheart, very cooperative dog. And then the bug really hit me like, well, I've got property. I've already got a kennel outside. It's got 2 runs. I need a second dog. Got a German wire hair. Found out that they were a lot, but I love that to this day. They're still probably my favorite breed, but there's only been a couple of them I've owned that would be, a dog that I want to bring everywhere. But
Okay.
I love that breed. So I went from like the dog I would say everybody should get or try is a German short hair to the dog that could be a lot for people when it comes to their sharpness, their fighting, their love of porcupines, their cats, And a friend of mine, older friend of mine, who's still around right now in Virginia, he wanted a Bracco Italiano because he went to Italy and he saw one. And he says, I got to have one. And he calls me up. He says, and I've already been judging NAV to test for a long time, or quite a while, not a long time. But anyway, he ended up finding a dog that was returned. There was only like 3 or 4 breeders in the country. And he found one, and a friend of mine could get it delivered to me, and I could get it delivered to him. And I saw this big houndy looking dog, and I was like, this is the goofiest thing in the world, right? There's no way that this is going to be my breed that I kind of fall for. But anyway, I bring this dog to Bill, and right away he needs some help with it. We take it out. This dog was afraid of grass. This dog was afraid of gunfire. This dog was afraid of birds.
Oh, wow.
I brought the dog back home with the intention of giving it to my neighbor, who said he always wanted a dog like the Beverly Hillbillies did, like a big hound dog to sit on the porch. And I literally called Jerry up. I said, Jerry, I got the dog for you. Are you sure? I said, yep, I'm bringing it over as soon as I get home. And then when I got to, because we live in a big wooded area here. Everybody's on 5, 20 or 100 acres. And so Jerry was one of my best friends. And I'd go over there and just watch this dog. The dog was such a clown. Like, it would try to sit in a rocking chair. It would try for 20 minutes to sit, and it would fall over, and it would try again. And its whole demeanor just, I was like, you're as goofy as me. You're as goofy as me with like a 12-pack of Miller Lite in me. It was, and I just said, man, I knew the dog wasn't going to ever be a runaway dog. I knew they had zero aggression. And I had some dogs that forced me to get rid of other dogs because I had to keep the dog I owned, and I couldn't add another dog to the mix because of the aggression. And that's just a reality. That happens with all breeds. It just happens more frequently with wire hairs, especially, 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So this dog was growing on me as my neighbor's rearing it, and he starts taking it out, and it starts getting used to the woods, and it got used to gunfire. It never really got a lot of hunting in, but I was watching this dog. We'd go for walks out in the woods, on 100 acres. And I was like, man, if this dog really hunted, I mean, he's so connected. He's so check in with you, and he moves so pretty through the woods. He's not pounding the ground. So I fell in love with the breed because I gave this guy a porch dog, And then I went on to search for myself to find one. And then I found out how hard they are to find.
Sure.
And I finally found one, and I brought it home, and she was a good one. And then I imported another one from Hungary, and he was a dandy. And I never intended on being a breeder, but I've been in business my whole life. And I remember arguing with somebody later on with the Bracco Italiano Club of America, who said, well, we don't do this for money. And I says, I don't know who we is, but the person who sold me my dog was doing it for money. And the person in Hungary, I believe I paid him money. And if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it as right as I can. And I intend on making money with it. I was just and she said, well, yeah, you can make money, but the intent shouldn't be to make money. I'm like, should you open up a restaurant with just the hope of feeding people, or really making good meals that also make you a good income? You know what I mean?
Right.
I just approached it like a business, but then I wanted to do as much due diligence as I could. So for a breed of dogs that was barely tested in this country, they were just owned by a lot of people that thought they were cool. They look good. They're real friendly. Not the hardest hunting dog in the world by any means, which fit the bill for a lot of people. They're like, yeah, if the dog has to watch TV for the summertime, it's going to be okay, right? And I did NAVDA testing with them. I set my own goals for what I would do for breeding. I tried to do, not breed mate, but looked into the line. I did as much due diligence as I could with health checks, produce healthy litters. If I had some pups with, let's say, umbilical hernias, which happened quite often, and almost at least one in every litter or more, I would get those fixed ahead of time, or I would tell the owner, look, this dog's going to need umbilical surgery. Do you have a veterinarian currently? If not, we're going to keep the dog, get it done here. And I know people to this day that bring home dogs and they show them to me, and I pick the puppy up and it's got this protruding umbilical hernia, and the breeder never said anything about it. And that could be any breed of dog.
Sure.
And
yeah.
So, yeah, that's the long and short, or the short and long of how I got into the breed. I like their temperament over everything else. And that's probably just from having and judging a lot of dogs with what I call an unbalanced temperament, meaning a lot of go, but not a lot of no, or not a lot of gas pedal. Where's the brake pedal? You can own it for 3 years. Like, I still can't find the brake pedal. Now, a lot of that is training, conditioning.
Yeah.
You know, a good trainer can get great things out of just about every dog, right? As long as the dog has some go. But the Bracco is really made for a person who knows a little bit about dogs, but also is like, yeah, I sure wouldn't mind one that doesn't aggravate me, you know? And so that's how I fell in love with the breed, their disposition, their personality, but they've got flaws up the wazoo. They, they, you know, at a minimum, I mean, like a big male Bracco, the drool that's going to come out of his mouth, and when he
Oh,
shakes
yeah.
his head, it's like having a Saint Bernard around you. It's terrible. So you have to get past that, you know. The we call them goats, the people who are honest about it. When they're puppies, I swear to God, they'll just eat gravel. They'll just, I mean, like I've had a lot of different dogs. Never saw a dog just go for a rock pile before. It's like that's not kibble, you dummy. You know, they're almost like, I don't want to say slow, but their development is so slow. They're like having a kid that takes 20 years to become 10 years old. You know, it's that they're slow.
They are fun to watch though. You know, we've had a few folks in our NAVDA chapter that come and have Braccos, and they train with us from time to time. But we actually had two Bracco puppies at our NA test this past weekend, two on the same day. So
Wow.
that was fun. And for me, I prefer the smaller dogs, but I love watching a Bracco. Or Bracco is a great dog for me to be in the field with, maybe to
Right.
hunt over, that somebody else can own.
There you go.
Because
Yeah.
I get 2.5 of my dogs for every one Bracco. So,
Right. And at the price of dog food, that's worth it.
oh my gosh. Yeah, you're not kidding, right?
I bred probably, I can't remember what letter I got in the alphabet. First, I did have a couple of short hair breedings, so I stayed with the same kennel name. But I probably had overall 15 litters maybe of Braccos, which there are people that have had more.
Sure, yeah.
Not many people that have done more with them. You know,
Right.
a couple. I always felt, and this bothers me across the whole dog world. If you're going to sell sporting dogs, I don't care if it's Brittany's or Munsterlanders or whatever, you should be as engrossed in what you can do for that breed, you know, and be a hunter. It's like going to a bar and the bartender, it's his first day and he doesn't know anything about talking to people. You know, that bar is not going to be a busy bar. If
Not
nothing
gonna
else,
do well.
the bartender should be able to be a bartender to the people. And when you sell dogs, you should be able to be the person to that. If they're only going to be a mediocre once in a while hunter, you can relate with them. If they're going to be a hardcore hunter, you can show them what you've done with your dogs. If they want to test their dogs, you can show them these dogs can be tested. You know, to me, in so many breeds, the people aren't rounded enough, you know, and especially with what we call the orphan breeds or the minority breeds.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of breeders that are very one-sided, right? There are some breeders that are producing some great dogs that add a lot to the gene pool that don't even hunt.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it takes another person that can figure out how to bring those maybe great structure genes back into their line,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah. I paid attention to the confirmation game. I actually ran around the ring a couple times.
I have to. I don't love
And
it, but I've done it.
no, well, my problem is I have a I have a I have a spinal defect from birth that tilts me forward, kind of like Foghorn Leghorn or Yosemite Sam, right? So I already have this kind of forward tilt, and I'm bow-legged.
Oh, there you
And
go.
when I'm running or trotting a dog around the ring, I've had friends. There's a lot of obviously there's way more women in the show ring business than there is men,
Hmm.
and I became friends with them in the Bracco world. And I think one of them finally said, "Ron, let me run your dog around because the judge is trying to figure out what's wrong with you while you're running. She's not even looking at the dog. You, you're a mess. You're a mess." So, but I went to a lot of confirmation shows, and the breed club had yearly confirmational shows, and I appreciated that part of it. So if a person was looking for confirmation in a pup, what I could help, I could stack the pup up and say, I think this one's got a little better front end, or he's holding his back end up a little. So yeah, going to being a breeder, I tried to do the best I could. And the real reason I quit doing it was my daughter's all aged out because it's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of work. And sometimes it comes in hunting season. And I'm a little selfish in that regard. I don't want to litter of dogs on the ground anywhere, from September on, And so I lost a couple dogs, tragically, that were my next breeding pair of dogs, and I would have tried to get that back, but I lost the help. I lost my daughter.
Right.
I went to college and got married and said, "Sorry, Dad, can't help you anymore."
That's a great hobby for you to continue, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, well, now they could probably, if I wait a little longer, I might get the grandkids to help. Maybe.
Oh, there you go. There you go. When you look at a Bracco move, because they're so big and they don't move quickly, but they cover a lot of ground. And I think they're moving just as fast as most of the other breeds, just as fast as the average bird dog is. They just don't look like they're working hard trying to do it.
Yeah, there's a gait to those dogs. Spinonis have it as well. But I've also I had a German Wirehair named Haskell back in the day. And I'm throwing the word gated around, like, Tennessee walking horse, right? That's a gated horse. There's a shuffle to the feet that give it a smooth ride. And I had a German Wirehair that watching him was just like watching a Bracco. There was no pound in the ground. There was no seesaw. You see some dogs that look like a seesaw, like front end, back end, front end, back
Right.
end, or they come running past you and it sounds like a quarter horse. It's like, yeah, most Braccos, they don't pound the ground. They move pretty smooth and they do cover ground. And I know guys back in the club days, that he was probably before chucker hunting became like the thing to do. Now everybody wants to be a chucker hunter now.
Yeah.
They want to climb up mountains, I guess. But this guy lived in Gerlach, Nevada, and he was chucker hunting with a pair of Braccos in probably it would have been 80s and 90s. When not that many people were, there was people chucker hunting, but so the dog is capable of a lot. They just don't look, it's like looking at an old Studebaker, it's kind of like the speedometer said 120. It just doesn't look like
it ain't happening. Yeah. Yeah.
Heavy car.
And so admittedly, I haven't done my homework on the breed like I normally do yet. I'll have done it before I publish this. I promise you that. But what are Braccos typically hunting back in Italy, or at least when the breed was being refined by Italians?
Boy, I'd have to go get Craig Koshik's book out.
Yeah,
because I wouldn't know the species. But there's I know there's a partridge, and I believe there's a grouse that's native to the hills in the mountains. I do know that there was the history of it. There's a liver and white and there's an orange and white. One's a Lombardy and one's I think a Piedmont or something with a P. I should know. And that was kind of like two different regions. And one of them was a little heavier and one of them was a little lighter. Even at that point, it wasn't a lighter bone dog. It was just not as heavy.
Right.
Bone dog. And I couldn't say that they used them for waterfowl. But I know it's one of the oldest breeds, traceable breeds, in Europe. They trace them, they say that there's, paintings from the 1300s. Of course, they're not going to look just like a Bracco, but they're certainly like the Spanish pointer. Very long, houndy ear, houndy face, long-legged dog. But I don't know enough of the real history to say what they were hunting, other than had to be the partridge and the quail, whatever lives in Italy.
Right. But I'm assuming, pretty hilly area. I think most
Yeah.
of Italy, particularly the whole
Oh,
northern
yeah.
half of Italy. It's pretty darn hilly. So these are dogs that were at least originally bred to kind of deal with some of that
Oh, yeah.
steepness in terrain and change in elevation and things like that.
And maybe that's never, and who knows, we could speculate. Maybe the dogs that were raised and bred in those terrains were bred more for the endurance and not for the speed,
Yeah,
you know, because you're just not going to run full speed up and down a mountain. The dog will break its neck going down and pull a muscle going up, right?
sure.
And maybe that's it, I know I've had mine in the mountains. I've had them in the mountains in Montana, and I've hunted them a lot in the mountains in Virginia, and they do well, and yeah, I wish I knew more about the real history of them, but I know it's one of the oldest recognized breeds. Now, I don't know as far as FCI, which would be the European version of AKC, the governing registry for dogs in Europe. I don't know what that goes back to, but I know the breed itself has been around a long time. Yeah.
Sure. And one thing I learned just last week actually is that there are some breeds that are pretty old, but weren't FCI recognized until in some cases several decades after they were AKC recognized. And we're talking about continental Europe bird dogs.
Right. Yeah, you're probably right. I think you are right on that for sure.
Yeah,
They were just bred locally, and you've had some on your podcast that you still can't pronounce, right? Like
I still can't do it.
Brent Patricia. I can't say that one either.
Yeah, you can't either. Yeah. Oh. Do you still have Braccos in your kennel?
I do. I don't have any of my original. Well, I take that back. Um, the last of my original stock was Bravo, and he died about 2 years ago, I think, maybe three. And a friend of mine in Wisconsin's wife had one. It wasn't good in the water. It got a 1 in its field search, which
Oh,
immediately, if I asked you, what would you think it did? It probably just walked, right?
yep.
No, it was gone. It was
Really?
gone. It was just gone. So they
So
had no
plenty of desire, but no cooperation.
cooperation, and they were going to get rid of her. And I said, well, let me see if I can find a home for her. Let me see if she fits. I paid her. I paid him for it with the intention I had a friend that was looking for one. And she was a clown enough, and I started falling for her a little bit. And I kept her. And then I got into a wire-haired Vizsla about 3 years ago, which went back to temperament again. I wanted a wire hair. I liked the look. I like the coat. I like the beard. I mean, I like your beard, in fact, because
Well,
everybody knows
thank you.
we're on. Very few people have a good beard, Um, but um, but I have a soft spot for Braccos, and a friend from Pennsylvania called me up on my way to Virginia, and he says, Ron, I'm looking for a home for a 1-year-old Bracco. I don't want to sell her, but I'm going to be rebuilding a house and then remodeling the house I'm selling. This dog it's just not going to get any work. It's just not. And I said, well, I don't want to buy it from you, but I can guarantee it's going to go on 3 or 4 awesome bird hunting trips this year. And he says, take her home. Well, it turns out she's related to my dogs too, because Garrett got his first breeding stock from me. So I guess I'm kind of back in the game a little bit with
Yeah.
a little piece of my old breeding stock. And she's challenging. She's a kind of a typical Bracco, a little slow on some things, but she got some legs under her. I like her legs. I am so looking forward to. I've had her out on some training days, and I saw her progress. She left home and she got here and she was like, I don't know what to do, right? Where a lot of dogs, my old German short hair Queenie, I could have gave her to you and she would have hunted the same for you, for me, for, you know what I mean? She just wanted to hunt. These dogs need to be a little more connected, And I had to, the first time we got her into my kennel box, it took me and Garrett, both of us she wasn't fighting us. She just lived in a kennel like my dogs do with an inside-outside run. He took her to the vet in a car. She never had to go into a actual crate in her whole life. She was 10 months old.
Oh,
It looked like we were loading a dead body into this crate. I mean, it was pitiful. One leg, two leg, head, pick up the rump, shove it. It looked like you were loading a large muzzle loader gun with a ball that didn't fit the barrel. And last night I tapped on the tailgate. She jumped on the tailgate and I held her by the collar. I didn't want her to jump back off. And I opened the door and she walked into the kennel. I'm like, yes.
Wow, look at that, huh?
Now, your average dog, that would have took about 2 times.
Yeah.
With her, it took about 8 times to get. So you got to have patience. You know, it's really true with some breeds. You have to have patience. You really do. And that's one of them. So, yeah. So that's what I've got for Braccos. I've got that Itty. She's about 6 now. Good retriever. Gets too close to birds, still gets too close. But if I love a dog, it's going to be with me till the end. I've had a lot of dogs, and I've gotten rid of a lot of dogs. I've given Braccos away to people. I did have one that was a runaway dog because she could jump the fence at will. I mean, this dog, you think of a Bracco jumping a solid 4-foot fence.
I can't imagine it.
There's no way. This dog just went like over. Just at will. And I talked to a friend that was and she had seen her in the show ring. And I said, do you want her? She goes, oh, I'd love her. A year later, she goes, yeah, she ran away once. She's my favorite dog. She just cuddles up with me. Maybe dogs can hit a, Control Alt Delete or something, or a reset but like Itty, I'll keep her till her dying day. And, unless my friend Garrett wants Woxie back, I think I'm going to be able to make something out of Woxie, which who knows? If Garrett ends up breeding her, who knows? I might be back into another one again. So I'm never going to say no to anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you've got some other dogs out in the kennel too, right?
Yeah, I'm on my second English Cocker. My first one sadly passed away at 2. And immediately that same night, that we put her down at the vet, I was on the phone with a friend and had a breeding lined up and had another English Cocker. I think I hate to encourage the popularity of a breed because it can encourage a lot of people to breed that shouldn't be breeding, but I don't know anybody who wouldn't be happy owning one. I don't care if you hunt them or not. They're just the funnest, at least the ones I bought, and I bought them from well-known, well-versed. I bought them from people that I wanted people that like myself. They knew the dog, knew the breed, and did everything with the breed, not just bred them or just showed them or just hunted. They come out of the box. The only thing they don't know is their name until you give them a name. They're just fantastic dogs. And then my other walk the plank dog was my German or my wire-haired Vizsla. And I met that breeder in North Dakota. She had a litter of dogs on the ground, and a friend of mine, Jeff, he actually docked the tails on this litter on the second day of the NAVDA test at night.
Oh, wow.
She just had the litter, and she had an appointment for like Wednesday or Thursday, and I think it was her first litter of dogs. And Jeff said, well, I dock all my own dogs' tails. And he goes, why are you waiting until 5 days? She goes, well, that's when I had an opening. He goes, no, you need to do it on day 2. It might have been day 3, but he goes, no,
Right.
That's waiting too long. He said, you want to do it? So we literally, after the end of the test day, her dad showed up with a bushel barrel of puppies, and we were docking the tails. And we docked one of them a little shorter because I liked them a little shorter, and that was the one I wanted.
You marked your own dog.
We marked it. Yeah, we marked it. And with that, I might have, who knows if I marked the right one, But again, he's a very, very, my biggest thing with dogs, and this came from judging them for so many years and continuing to judge, is cooperation. I think most of us aren't good enough trainers. And I say most, that could be 51%, but I'd say most of us, Joe 12 gauge, Jill 12 gauge people out there, you don't learn enough until you're either mentored by somebody really good and you're on their hip, or you struggle through your first few dogs, right? And a dog that doesn't have good natural cooperation, that's why it's on the scorecards for NAVDA and the Federation. Cooperation's on there for a reason. And it's passed on through its lineage, just like the nose and the search and the desire. If you have a cooperative dog, you're ahead of the game. Now, if you want to compete in NASTRA or a field trial, yeah, you can get away with a non-cooperative dog, but you better be a good trainer. But you kind of want that dog that almost doesn't need you. You know, you got to talk them into being a partner. I like a dog that the minute I see it mature, it's like, you know what? If I fell asleep in the truck with the door open, I'm not going to have to look, on phone poles for lost dog recovered. I want the
Yeah.
dog like, gosh, I wonder when he's going to wake up and go hunting again. That's what I'm looking for in my golden years.
The theme on this show pretty commonly is that most people need a dog that's not going to be a nuisance 345 days out of the year, right?
Yeah.
Because most people hunt 20 days or fewer every year. So some of those race cars that, they went to a NAVDA training day, they went to a NAVDA chapter on a training day to see a handful of different versatile dogs, and they picked the fastest race car out the gate. Maybe something else that comes along with that.
Mm-hmm. There usually is. And like I said, a good trainer, I could name off kennels of short hairs because it's the most popular, upland dog, pointing dog out there. There's more of them than anything. That if I got a short hair, I know exactly the kennels I would go to, and then if I wanted to compete with them, I know exactly the kennels I'd go to for them.
Right.
That's almost, when they talk about like the pointers, or they talk about way back in the day, you could talk about the Irish setter, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a real split. There was the performance, and then there was the foot hunter, or the, you could say, show. I just have to have a dog that has cooperation, because even though it sounds funny, like I have a home in Virginia, which I still own. I bought years ago for work. I immediately I built a 5-dog run kennel there with inside outside kennels off the barn. And so my dogs traveled with me all the time. And in Virginia, they were all bed dogs. All the guys that worked for me had a bedroom in the house, and they would go get a dog from the kennel, because everybody loves a dog sleeping with them, right? It's great. It's like you're away from home and the dog gets up there and you're like, oh man, good morning. The dogs loved it. Now they come back to Michigan and they're all like, what the hell? We're in kennels.
Yeah.
But you can see where you're talking to me from. The kennel is also my recording studio, my man cave, my apartment. So they kind of are in the house, but they're in kennels right now. They're all in their own walk-in kennels, and you never have to worry about anything. That's a whole rabbit hole we go down. When you talk about the Braccos, you could imagine the people that were buying them. For one, they were probably the most expensive dog 20 years ago. Now, every breed of pointing dog has caught up to that dollar amount. So that's kind of irrelevant. But most dogs are bought now, are raised in the house, and they're going to be family. They're more than just a yard dog. And cooperation, boy, it goes a long way. It goes a long way when it comes to the dog, like understanding when it's on. I hate the term on switch and off switch, but it is kind of a thing.
It is. Yeah.
The problem is you looking for the switch. I mean, where's the damn switch, Bill? I don't know. Yeah. Is it that tickle spot where they move their leg? Is that the
right?
Switch? I don't know.
For the first time ever, I've got 2 puppies in the house with me right now. And normally I'd say I'm okay at finding that switch. But when there's 2 puppies, that switch gets a lot harder to find, I can tell you.
Yeah, because one of them's on the other corner knocking the light switch back on.
Yeah.
One switch back on. Yeah, that's how did you end up with that? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, a lot of people already know. So one of them is mine. One of them is going to stay with me. That's a female. The other is a male who's 1 week older than her and from a different kennel. But that's a kind of a contract dog, I guess, if you will. There's no contract there, but he's a dog that I'm starting, and then the breeder and I are selling him together.
Okay.
So we've got hunting season coming up here. So are you getting ready? You getting the dogs ready?
I'm notorious for not overdoing it because I'm not having to test any dogs. Like when I had to have dogs ready to be tested at, but I get them out on Wednesdays. We have a training grounds, our club training grounds.
Yeah.
Get them out, stretch their legs, or sometimes in the morning I'll load up a couple dogs and take them out there. But I'm talking a 20-minute. I mean they're running the whole time, and I'm walking, and just to keep their muscles toned up.
Yeah.
I don't overdo it. I don't road dogs. I never have. I will say I took a lot more walks with them, 20 years ago when I was getting them ready for things. Because you do have to have them in condition. But yeah, so my getting the dogs ready is just kind of going going once a week and getting them out on, I think this year I bought, and it was only a week ago, I bought probably 6 chuckers, and that's the only birds I bought. Now, I've got a friend bringing me some quail next week, and we're going to just let them go loose out in the woods across the road from me. We have a quail caller out there, and we're not going to shoot them. And I would tell people, if you ever have the opportunity, you got to find the right birds, the right bird breeder. I mean, they're going to get picked off by hawks and owls but if you have some good cover, keeping some quail around, it's nice to have 30 or 40 acres. I've got more than that across the street. It's great. They'll start getting into those birds, and it's light and dark compared to going out in the field, sticking a chucker in a launcher, or sticking him in a tump of grass on its head and waving him. You let them quail get out there, and them dogs will get ready really quick. They're like, oh, it's as real as it can get, especially when you're not shooting them. They just want them all the more, and
right.
Them quail in a good woodlot, they buzz out and they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like watching one of the training ground fly up and go 50 yards. They get wild pretty quick. And
sure.
So I'll do that first 2 weeks of September before I leave for North Dakota. I'll have that set up. And I've only been doing that a little bit. A good friend of mine, he's been doing that for years. He's a full-time trainer, and I just couldn't believe how wild these quail were. They were just no different. I would venture to say just as hard to hit, and just as they moved around all over the property. Some days you could find them, some days you couldn't find them. Like
right.
You think, well, how could you not find them in a 40-acre area? And you couldn't find them. And then the next day you'd find 2 coveys. It was, So that would be what I would do for preseason. And I always keep their weight down. I'm kind of, I don't want to say fanatical about it. I don't measure out food. I look at the dog, and if I don't see a couple ribs showing, or if I don't feel a couple ribs showing, I'm not going to let them start off, because I'm not roading them into shape. I'm not going to let them start off, as fat as we'll let ourselves start off for our first walk of the year. We can kind of, drink a Gatorade and get through that first couple. We can get our sea legs under us, because all we're doing is walking, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to sprint myself to death when I'm out bird hunting.
Right. But if you had to go to boot camp, damn, you don't want to go into boot camp fat. That's no way to start. You would know. You were in the military for how long?
Well, 25 years, but I didn't start out fat, thankfully. I ended fat.
You mean they don't make you march and run all the way through your career in the Army?
No, I stayed fit. Actually, source of pride, I don't talk about it much, but since you brought it up, I did. So the Army has a new physical fitness test. It's not new anymore, but it's new to me, right? And I was able to get a maximum score before I retired. My last one I took before I retired, I got a maximum score, which was not easy, because it's not an easy test, especially when you're 47 years old. Or I was 46 at the time. But so I went out in good shape, but I haven't run a step since August 11th of 2023.
And I'm going to guess from my earlier comment, you haven't shaved since then either.
I had to, I had to trim it up once pretty considerably for a job interview, and I
Uh-huh.
didn't get the job. So I said, forget that. I'm not doing it ever again.
You shaved for 25 years straight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If there's a job that I have to apply for where I have to shave, they can just somebody. That's a good job for somebody else.
Well, you're lucky because beards are, so to speak, in,
They are in. I could pass for a hipster. I
Yeah,
could pull that
exactly.
off. I had a craft beer and maybe some different glasses.
A little rounder glasses. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
there you
could
go.
job at a brewery in a heartbeat. You look like you know craft beer.
Yeah. If Busch Light's a craft beer, then I'm all about it.
No.
So you did mention VHDF before, though, and I know so you've judged a few times now.
Yeah. I originally judged for NAVDA for, I don't know if it was with apprenticing and judging, it might have been 25 years. And then I knew about the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation. I knew it was very similar. It's a versatile hunting dog test, but it took its roots from the early NAVDA and the German system of testing, the VDD-GNA or the VGP tests and tests. And I was always curious about it. And in fact, years ago, one of the founders of it, Jeff Funke, he was also a NAVDA judge, and we judged together back in the day. I was always curious about it because I liked a couple of the things that they did. One thing, most importantly, is the scoring system.
Yes.
I was oblivious to the fact that in NAVDA we have, obviously we don't give out a lot of zeros, but we have 0 through 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have basically 4 numbers you could earn, and a 10-point system with an 11 and a 12 possibility, you really can sort out the cream of the crop. There's so many testing days where, judges have to be cohesive, and we have to have a consensus. We have to, before we give the score to the person, I might be at a 2 and the other 2 judges might be at a 3. And we're going to have a lively discussion about why I think it's a 2 and why they think it's a 3. And I'm either going to sway one of them my way and the other one will go, okay, I'll go with you guys. Or they're going to go, Ron, look, it was this is what we saw. And I said, all right, I'm at your 3. But what that does, and I know this because when I started judging, I was plagued by this, like all new judges are. You look at the card and you're like, ooh, a 3 is going to give them a prize, right? A different prize category. That could be a prize 1, or that could be a prize 2. And you sometimes can't get that out of your head. And with no prize system and just a numerical number with 10 to pick from, there is, I will say, and this is a bold statement, half of the puppies I ever judged that got a 4 in field search, that's our maximum score, would have been an 8 in a 10-point system.
Yep.
That's still a darn good score. That's 80% of the work, which still reflects NAVDA's 75% and up for a 4, right? But it's a real accurate way, and it gets those people away from going, I got a maximum score, I got a prize 1. NAVDA, in my opinion, has become a sport to a lot of people. It's a great sport, but it's become a sport. And the Federation I like old things. I like old guns. I like 16 gauge shotguns. I like old stuff. I'm old. And I like things that are, I guess, built more solid in a 10-point system with merit for even more work, which doesn't get given often. But there's times when we see a dog do something that's just unbelievable. Like I didn't see this dog, but we were asking Jeff because, he's judged more of these tests than anybody. I said, like, how would you give in a drag for a utility dog, right? As you know a little bit about NAVD, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners do. We drag a duck anywhere from 100 to 200 yards away, a little zigzaggy. We hide the duck. It's like, how would a dog earn an 11 in a drag? He says, very rarely. But we had a dog that ran to go get the duck, ran down doing, it's not a nose score. It's just they can find it. On the way, it kicked up a deer. It stopped. It watched the deer run away, put its head back down, got to the duck. On its way back with the duck, bumped another deer, never spit the duck out, and never chased the deer. But he stopped, looked at the deer, and was like, "Nope, got to get back." Now that dog deserves something, right? That dog deserves something, and that dog would get an 11. But going back to the basic system, though, is a 10-point system, and it's much more accurate for a breeder. If you had, for a NAVDA Breeders' Award, you need 90 points or above for an average. So if you had a whole bunch of dogs that got 4 in searches, how good were the searches? If you had 4 puppies in a litter that got hens, like that meant there was, out of all, with an 11 or 12, it's got to be unanimous with judges. For a 10, you could still make an argument and you could talk the other judge up to it. It's still got to be a consensus. But if all judges saw a 10, you wanted for nothing. You wanted that dog in your truck.
Yeah.
You were hoping that something happened to the handler and you were going to have to take that young dog home. It's a much more accurate picture. So that's something I've only done a handful of 3 tests total. I hope to do more next year. And I hope the system grows a little bit. And it's not, I look at it like podcasters, right? I think there's room for the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation on the landscape, because the chapters that are out here now, the one in Pennsylvania, it's a NAVDA chapter. It's an established NAVDA chapter. These people love doing this stuff so much with their dogs. They're also a federation chapter. Sure. And it gives them more opportunity to get their dog ready, And those are people that are, as I said, playing the game, but it goes like podcasting. When you mentioned in the beginning, I was the first Upland podcast. I welcomed every podcast that's ever been. I probably talked to every host. Now, some of them lasted 2 months, some of them lasted a year, but I'll bet you most of them have reached out to me, and I said, "Yeah, let me hear it. I'd like to hear it." I've talked to them. The ones that have stayed, we're all friends. We all have our numbers in our contacts, and I welcome, and I would like listeners to welcome the idea of trying a Versatile Hunting Dog Federation test sometime, because same kind of experience. I will tell you, it's same kind of experience. You just get a real accurate picture of your dog, or I guess a finer picture of your dog.
Absolutely. So a friend of mine and I our original plan was to host a VHDF test at her property, but then we learned that we have to have a chapter in order to host a test, like pretty much every other,
Yeah.
So I think we're going to start a chapter so that we can host a test on her property. And I have a little kind of nostalgic thing that I'd like to do with only small Munsterlanders on one day, because I see it as an opportunity to educate a few judges on a bunch of different Munsters, from, puppies to finished dogs. And kind of what some of these judges, and if they've been experienced NAVDA judges before, then they've seen a fair number of small Munsterlanders. But I don't know if any Munsters have tested in VHDF yet, and I'm pretty sure if there have been any, it's been a handful. It hasn't been very many.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of dogs. There's a lot of wire hairs that have done it. Especially out west. It has a decent foothold out west. But yeah, I would bet there's a handful of every dog in there, but very, very few. That would be, hey, if you guys do it, I'd be glad to come down and judge, help out, and do anything. It's a lot of fun, just like NAVDA is. It's
Sure.
a lot of people like-minded and that want to learn a little bit more. And I'll say this, I'll spank NAVDA on the bottom a little bit. When I started NAVDA, it was probably I, I would venture to say 90% hunters. Like
Yeah.
pretty. Now again, the landscape was different. There was still some pheasants to shoot in Indiana.
Right.
When I started.
Not a whole lot of them left.
So it's not fair to say there's NAVHDA people out there that don't. There's NAVHDA people that live in areas where there are no wild birds to hunt. So I get it, but the focus needs to be on hunting. And I think they've lost their way in some of the scoring. And we're I'm sure going to be guilty of it in some factions or in some parts of the test. But something we keep in our conversation is we're developing a hunting dog. We're developing a hunting dog. We keep that in there. We're not here to get a ribbon. We're not here to get a prize. We're here to get evaluation. Like when NAVHDA started, it was pretty much breeders and some people they could talk into going to. It was very small. It was a very small group. It just became, they did things right because look at the size of it, But yeah, if you ever want to do anything with a chapter down there, I'd be glad to help.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do like that. I try to look at it a little optimistically, if I could speak, with the growth of NAVHDA. And what I'm trying to figure out is how we take some of those people that maybe got a bird dog because they like the look of the dog or something like that, and their breeder talked them into testing the dog with NAVHDA. How do we turn that person into a hunter?
Right.
I mean, they're this close.
Yeah.
Right. So
they got all the stuff.
Got the tools.
Right.
Yep.
And I just had a conversation with Ben Jones from the Rough Grouse Society. We just recorded this morning. Just what you said. You got these people that get the dog from the breeder. They're so close to being a hunter and then an advocate.
There you go. Yep.
For hunting and habitat, and a hunter and an advocate for the breed. There's 100,000 people out there with a bird dog that just I don't say they need the nudge, but it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah,
you're never going to nudge them.
Yeah.
You're never going to nudge them all.
Right.
But all there's another 5 or 10%. We got it licked.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they need to spend some time training for hunting and not just for the test.
Justin McGrail and I developed the Upland Institute. It's an online bird hunting or dog training school for pointing dogs.
Right.
I would say the foundations could be used for your pet collie, just when it comes to crate training and calming touch and things like that. But what I found interesting about when I got to know, and I met Justin decades ago, if you come to him and said, "Can you get my dog ready for an AKC test or a NAVHDA test or something?" He'd look at you and go, "Nope, I get your dog ready to hunt."
There you go.
But that's how close. That's how we should look at it. You should be going to this testing organization, getting your dog ready to hunt.
Yeah.
And he will. The things he's going to teach your dog are all parts of a hunting test, but he's just concerned about getting your dog ready for its hunting season. But it's gun exposure, bird exposure, steadiness eventually, all the things we need in the test. But he would turn you away as a customer if you said, "I need this dog ready for this test." He'd say, "Good for you. Go get him ready yourself. I'm going to get your dog ready for hunting season."
Right on.
I would encourage people, if you're new to this, and that the Upland Institute, the foundations course that we put together, is the most comprehensive course like that. And again, kind of like the podcast, it was the first one. And now there's other ones out there, and I'm sure they're going to be helpful and people are going to gravitate. But our foundations course, like I said, I don't care if your neighbor got themselves pick a breed, a Dalmatian. I would encourage them to buy the foundations course and just do the first puppy stuff because when I talked about cooperation and desire, Justin has dogs that are very high desire. He was a wild bird guide for decades out in Montana and Arizona. He doesn't do that anymore now that he's got a family. So he had to have performance dogs.
Yeah.
Yet you would not be able to tell his dogs from dogs that were uncooperative. But he did so much of that early foundation work with the dog where the dog knew its place, it knew its time, it knew what time it was, knew when its turn was. That you could take a very high desire dog and somebody would go, my God, is that dog cooperative? No, but you did everything right with it. And there's a lot to do right with a puppy when they're little. And it's all impulse. I mean, think about it. It's all impulse control. Given their own, they would eat the garbage, pee and poop in the house, not sleep in a crate, right? Chew up your sock. Like, given their own desires, they would be every dog, even my little Tagus over there. I call him Joe Pesci because we had plans of breeding him someday. He ended up short like me, built funny like me, and undershot, or overshot. But a dog like that, if I'd have let him go without the foundations, he might have been more cooperative in the field and stayed with me, but he'd have been a hellion.
Sure.
You give a puppy its head and it's going to take the reins, and the foundations course, I cannot brag about it enough. And I know people who have done the course, and I'll start talking about the more advanced work in it, and they'll be like, well, honestly, I never did that. But I did all that puppy stuff. Oh my God, my wife is so happy because the last dog ate the couch, But so yeah, there's my shameless plug for the Upland Institute.
And how many you've got foundations, and then what are some of the other courses?
We have the Trained Retrieve, which is a standalone course, and we have advanced bird work for those who want to. Of course, you would need that to go into any of the testing organizations, the advanced bird work. But I strongly recommend people to get some version of advanced bird work done on their dog, because as hunting season goes on, my dogs are not steady to wing shot and fall. They can be for a test, but as soon as hunting season, I don't insist on it. I don't want them to do any of the flushing themselves.
No.
And I want them, but I also don't want them to chase hen pheasants when I'm, I want to be able to say go bird, and I want them to turn around and come back and get back to hunting. You can't do that unless you live in bird country and the dog just learns that chasing birds is fruitless, which that does work. But most of us, how many birds do we get our dogs in front of where they're going to learn to not chase a bird?
Right.
We're taking pot shots at them, most of them, And I've yet to see the dog that knows the difference between a hen flying away or a sharp tail or a rooster pheasant. It's just a bird flying away.
Yeah, I've not seen that.
Puppies need impulse control, just like children. Just like children. Given their own, they'd be hellions too.
Yeah. That's why we put kids in playpens and puppies in crates, right?
Right. And yeah, they sleep in a crib in the beginning. They don't sleep in a bed. They sleep in a crib.
Right. Oh, man. Ron, I really appreciate the time that you've given me here. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I don't know what to add to it, other than, because you're covering so many of the minority breeds, if you're lucky enough to have a few breeders of that breed to pick from, if this person doesn't want to spend time on the phone, almost to the point where you want to, hey, I got to go, right? You want that person that wants to talk about their dogs and tell you about them and tell you the downside of them. I bring this back around to the Braccos. I literally would try to talk some people out of them. Other people were dead set, ready to get one. They've seen one. Their friend had one. From talking to them that they've had dogs before. But the minority breeds attract the new hunter for some reason. There's what was that one that we can't pronounce? The
Patrician.
Patrician. Yeah, it's partridge hound.
It's a Drent.
Danish partridge hound, right? The guy that's had 4 short hairs is not going to that breed, right? It's the new guy looking up breeds going, oh. So when you're looking for that minority breed, find the breeder who does the most for that breed. And that involves breed clubs, conformation, health testing, and hunting. Make sure there's some version of an avid hunter. And I don't care, going back to hunting preserves, I don't care if their dogs only live in a state where they can only hunt on a preserve. but make sure they've got dogs that are doing what you dream in your head you're going to do with your dog. Because there's a lot of them that don't. There's a few Bracco breeders out there that don't. I wouldn't go to court with this, but I would tell you that don't have a shotgun, let alone know how to hit something with one. If they do have a shotgun, they don't know how to hit something with it. They literally don't hunt, yet they're breeding this dog and bragging about this dog. So to people looking for minority breeds, I don't want to say buyer beware, because there's really good dogs, but do your due diligence on finding a breeder. And I'll wrap it up with this. I told people this email I get for the last 10 years now. Ron, love your show. My wife and I are finally going to get a dog. We're thinking of a Vizsla, a Munsterlander, or a Griffin. And I'm like, wow. If they'd have said 3 wire-coated dogs, I'd be like, okay, they want a wire. I mean, I would tell these people, I said, you know what? Find the breeders closest to you. And if there's a Brittany breeder that lives in the next city, you might end up falling in love with the breed from the breeder, because that person would be like a good breeder will be your best resource. You're going to be able to call them. It's almost like having AAA, the old AAA motor insurance, right? You get maps from them. You get roadside assistance from them. You get your flat tires fixed. A good breeder is going to help you all the way through. They're going to stick with you. And it's a good breeder is hard to be because they need to have a lot of time to talk to a lot of customers, and a good one will do it. So find a good breeder. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice, right? Pick the breed and then pick the breeder. And that decision number 2 is more important than decision number 1. So,
yep, exactly.
100%.
And if you got to go across the country to get it, that's what you got to do.
It'll be the least expensive thing you do with that dog anyway.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, Ron, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Well, you can go on Instagram on Hunting Dog Podcast. There's the Hunting Dog Podcast website on Instagram. We have a YouTube channel that we're starting to put a lot of content out with. You are familiar with some of the people that you've interviewed.
Sure.
Camille Rice, we did an in-depth video series on her and her history with the Weimaraners and breeding. We did the same thing with Bob Ferris. We did the same thing with Nancy Beth Clemens with the German Shorthair. That's on YouTube, and we're starting a new series on YouTube. So we're always putting some dog content out on YouTube. So we're not. I'm never taking my foot off the gas. I'll probably never stop doing a podcast. But anything that says Hunting Dog Podcast, you'll find it. You'll find it on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I don't do much there's not much to do on Facebook.
Nah.
And then the website, huntingdogpodcast.com, and you can find all of our content. You can find out, and most people, believe it or not, can get a hold of me. I'm very accessible. I'm retired. If I'm not talking with dogs, I'm having to mow the grass or do something around the house, and I'd much rather talk dogs. So I've helped a lot of people find a lot of dogs, and I'm glad to talk them through anything.
Hey, Ron, thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks for being active in the space and, building the community that you do. It was really cool meeting you out at Pheasant Fest this past spring. I'm assuming I'll probably see you again, next spring. I know I'll be there, but I'm assuming you'll probably be there too.
Oh, yeah.
Probably not sleeping in your camper again, but you might have it there next to you.
I would think so. I'll be there with bells on, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you again and all the listeners come through. And, we give Pheasant Fest a nice plug, because if you're new to it, you can't spend a better day or two walking around Pheasant Fest. It's fun. It's just fun.
It's a good time.
Yeah.
Yep. And go early for the puppy parade.
Oh, go early and stay late.
There you go.
All right.
All right, Ron.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed episode number 32 of the Whoa Post podcast. And if you did, leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Just doing that helps us out a ton. Also, check out Ron's training videos at uplandinstitute.com. Remember to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Whoa Post, and you can contact me for any reason at bill@thewhoapost.com. And to further support the podcast and for exclusive content, head on over to patreon.com/thewhoapost and become a patron. Stay steady and God bless.